Grandpa Jerry Stephenson. Some people might not think being described as eccentric is a compliment. My Grandpa Jerry Stephenson has been described as eccentric by both people who knew him and in articles I read while doing research for this essay. If you had the privilege of having known my grandpa, you might think being described as eccentric was the greatest characteristic one could have. My grandpa was born on October 6, 1943 in Detroit, Michigan. He was the oldest of 6 children. He was born 17 days after his father Joe, the catcher who played his first professional baseball game with the New York Giants. In the book The 1967 Impossible Dream, my grandfather is quoted as saying, "The seeds were planted very early on. I've been in baseball since birth. I've got a picture of myself at 6 weeks old, laying in a crib with a small bat and ball in my hand. I guess you can say I started kind of early." My grandpa was hyperactive as a child. Today they would probably have said he had attention deficit disorder. My grandma said she has seen home movies when my grandpa was a child, and he never sat still. She said he was the same way as an adult, and especially when he was pitching. My grandma said he was a nervous wreck, and unfortunately, the only thing that calmed him down was smoking. Back then, you could smoke in the clubhouse, and he would smoke until he went on the baseball mound, and again the minute after he threw his last pitch. In the book Red Sox Nation, the author wrote that my grandfather dyed his hair green and talked to lampposts. It also said in the book that he once got on a bus in Reading, Pennsylvania, and offered a quarter to anyone who knew who he was. The author said my grandpa's nickname was Teens because he liked to read teen magazine, and he was into fashion and music. He loved the Beatles and wore turtleneck sweaters. My grandpa was very smart. He was obsessed with books almost as much as he was obsessed with baseball, which my grandma said always surprised people because he was seldom serious and liked to joke around. In my grandparents' house, they have a library, and there are hundreds of books on the shelves, and my grandpa read every one of them. He only read hardcover books, and when I was young, I would only read hardcover books too. I was 5 years old when he died, and the few memories I have of my Grandpa Jerry are of him playing baseball with me and of him reading books in his favorite chair. My grandpa had a scholarship to Stanford University, but he decided to sign with the Boston Red Sox the day after he graduated from Anaheim High School. He promised his parents he would get his college degree. My grandma said he took classes during the off seasons of his professional baseball playing and scouting career until he got his diploma. It took him 16 years to graduate. He might have been quirky as my mom described him, but he was a man of his word and kept his promises. Another one of my grandpa's crazy obsessions was Disneyland. He grew up in Anaheim, California, and he was one of the first people to go to the park when it opened in 1955. He went there whenever he was not traveling for baseball. Sometimes he and my grandma would go there just to walk for exercise. My grandma hid their styrofoam coffee cups in her purse, and they would get free refills at the coffee shop on Disneyland's Main Street. He knew everything you could know about Walt Disney and read every book ever written about Walt Disney and Disneyland. There's a whole section in my grandparents' library that are books about all things Disney. I called a family friend who is one of my grandpa's best friends. His name is Peter Gammons, and he is an award-winning baseball TV broadcaster and journalist. He said my grandpa was one of the funniest people who ever lived, and he was very loyal to his friends. Peter Gammons told me a story about my grandfather telling a joke about the Boston Red Sox' extremely short star second baseman, Dustin Pedroia. My grandpa said that Dustin Pedroia was so short that when he was born, his father gave out cigar butts. My grandpa told this to the Red Sox general manager, who had just spent $12 million to keep Pedroia on the team. I think in my grandpa's case, eccentric is a great quality to have. He was interesting and memorable because he was different. I know that some people might not think being eccentric is a positive attribute, but I think it is a great way to be described.